Now, before we get into it, this episode is brought to you by my Inspiring Kids Home program. Now, developing social and emotional skills for kids is the most paramount thing for their overall well-being. Getting kids to understand their emotions, getting to make friends with their big feelings, and also learning about self-acceptance, because one of the things is self-acceptance is so powerful. Once a kid can go, I am okay the way I am, then that can open the door to so many amazing possibilities. So, to get started on the home program, just click the links below. Should we just get going? So, are you ready?
Yes.
Are you ready, Gary? Okay, are you ready? Okay, you ready?
I thought it was on the phone, so Josh really kindly gave me some extra time to wash my hair.
Are you ready?
Yep, ready as all be.
I'm ready.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Let's do it.
In this episode of Josh Langley Gets to Know, we're going to find out about kids and ADHD with Chrissie Davies. Now, Chrissie is from Calm Consultancy, and she's just released a brand new book for kids called Love Me, Love My ADHD. I've had a sneak preview. I love this book. And Chrissie and I talk everything about ADHD, what parents need to know, what the misconceptions are, and a whole lot more. So grab a cup of coffee, pour a glass of wine, take the goldfish for a walk, whatever you want to do. But let's get to know Chrissie Davies and a little bit more about ADHD. Chrissie Davies, thank you so much for being on my show. How are you going?
I am wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Now, look, you've written a wonderful, wonderful book for kids about ADHD, Love Me, Love My ADHD. Now, before we talk about the book, let's get some things sort of straight about ADHD, because there's a lot of sort of misinformation out there and stuff like that. So what actually is it? And what are the three different types of ADHD?
I'm so glad you started off with that, because let's talk about the facts, okay? Because everybody knows somebody who has ADHD, but nobody, I think, until you actually live it, or you're raising children yourself, or you work, in the zone where you're talking to all these amazing, beautiful ADHDers, you are so right. There is so much information, incorrect things that have evolved so much from what we used to understand about ADHD. So I guess the most important thing to understand is that ADHD is an acronym that stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And many of us working in the field and also loving and raising ADHDs really don't like that word disorder, because it makes us all sound like there's something wrong with us, or that we're broken, or we're disordered, or we're, not quite right. And one of the things that I've come to realize after 25 years of working with so many ADHDs is they just think, feel, and see the world in such a unique and incredible way that we can harness and tap into and learn so much from. Stereotypically, we thought ADHD was a boy's condition, but we also now know so much more. I'm a neuroscientist. We're constantly evolving. The more we learn about the brain, the more we understand about ADHD as well. But the best way we could describe it, so that as many people understand it as possible, is that ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition in the brain, which significantly impacts many skills connected to the prefrontal cortex, things like planning, organization, communication, emotional regulation, self-control, a lot of those things that our ADHDers struggle with. But that now we absolutely recognize that girls can be ADHD as well. They don't always present in the same way, but ADHD is not what we thought was just a hyperactive little boy jumping around all over the furniture anymore. Yeah. So much of it is to do with understanding the way we think, the way we operate, the way we problem solve, the way we communicate, and the way we move through the world. And really importantly for me, how kids learn in education.
Yeah.
So we say ADHD as an umbrella, but they've drilled it down into three subtypes. that they're categorized as hyperactive ADHD, inattentive ADHD, or a combination of both. There are certain supports and scaffolding and understandings about being ADHD or having ADHD that we really need to get our head around, because if we don't, and we constantly have expectations and perceptions around our kids to be a certain way, we're actually really going against their natural brain wiring. Then causes all sorts of complexities and challenges, because their brain is telling them to do one thing, and then we as the adults are trying to make them think, feel, or do things another way, and it's really doesn't line up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because it's like, but parents aren't being educated, or really, where's the information that parents can access, so therefore they can really show up and, as you said, scaffold the experiences for their kids, so their kids can know that they are okay the way they are. Just think differently, maybe react differently, do things just slightly differently to other people. And it's like, I know what it's like when you have a child that has really, they fight against themselves because they think they're not normal. They don't fit. And the world around them is saying you are not normal, their school environment, everything else. And when really it's not the case. It can be slightly changed. Things can be moved and adapted, and different perceptions of what, like, say, ADHD or even autism and stuff like that are like. And to allow that child to go, oh, okay, I'm actually pretty good the way I am. And as you know, that changes everything once that child can actually accept themselves as they are, and other people accept that child for who they are.
Absolutely. So, and where does that begin, though? It begins in the family home, right?
Exactly,
because that's what children grow up knowing right from the get-go, really. And so I guess that, you know, what we absolutely know about ADHD too is that it is genetic. So very likely that if you have a child who is identified or diagnosed as being ADHD, then one parent or both are highly likely to be neurodivergent as well. And what's really interesting about that is we're getting this whole new wave of parents, which I think is incredible, of being diagnosed alongside their children, you know.
And I believe you're one of them, Chrissy.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yes, yeah. I am. Yeah. And
So,
I, you know, think it's such an incredible gift that I've been able to give to my kids, and also model that you can have ADHD, be successful, have a great life, you know, do work that inspires you and lights you up, and have people who love you for who you are. Yes, we have some days that are pretty hard work, or, you know, there's things about our brain that we've got to learn to understand how to support so that we can be the best people that we can be. But your ADHD does not define you. It's one part of who you are.
I love that. Yeah, it can inform you, but it doesn't define you. Yeah, I love that.
Correct.
So what are the top 5 things that you would tell a parent who has got a new diagnosis with their child? Even though I know it's taking a long time to get diagnosis, but what are the top 5 things you would say?
I'd like to touch on here inattentive ADHD, which predominantly presents in females and girls, and is so late to get picked up, because so much of it is about the inner workings of the brain, of cognitive functioning. And what we know about our gorgeous little ADHD is that they're very good at masking, or they're little chameleons. They seem to be able to fit in and bend and morph and mimic social cues and follow along. And, you know, I remember with my daughter, because she's inattentive ADHD, she said to me, I just copy the other kids. Whatever they're doing, I do. So she actually hid her challenges very well, right? And often in schools, especially, it's the noisy, loud ones that, you know, that get the help first. But we've got to be more aware that inattentive ADHD is very prominent in young girls as well. And so I think for me, I know part of that was, the first challenge was convincing people that she had ADHD. No one would listen to me. No one believed me. And I'm her mother, and I've also got 20 years of knowledge, you know, and have worked with thousands of ADHD children. And I kept being told, well, we don't see it at school. And so that would be my number one tip, is be prepared to fight and advocate, because the more knowledge and more confidence you have in your abilities and understandings about ADHD, the less likely, hopefully, people are going to push back against that.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The second thing would be, once you receive the diagnosis for your child, you know, and I see this a lot in my work, Josh, especially for mums, they're just hit with this massive wave of grief.
Yeah.
And sometimes angry at themselves, like for me as well with my daughter, it's like, how could this have not been picked up earlier? You know, we've lost so much time in education for her, you know, and one of the things I really want to share to other people going through this process is send yourself compassion, because you didn't know, you only know what you know, right? And really allow yourself to grieve and process that first, because I feel like once you be able to reach that place of radical acceptance, you rise like a woman possessed. Well, I certainly know I did.
Yeah.
But it can really hit you too when you know, it's not what you thought your life was going to be, or you've then unpacked your own diagnosis, which can be a real process for people to have to work through, depending on your own childhood and your own educational experiences. You know what I mean? So get yourself diagnosed, get yourself healthy, get your own emotional health in check, because everything that I live and breathe centers around the top-down philosophy, right?
Yep.
Is that we as the role models, if we're healthy, if we are living, breathing, authentic self-love and loving ourselves, and this is who we are, and you're not for everybody, you know, and all those sorts of things, that absolutely transpires and filters into our children's own identity and abilities to view themselves in the world.
Yeah, that's great.
And
That's a really empowering for parents to hear that. Yeah.
you got to believe it though, right, Josh? You've got to really believe it. And I think that to be able to get to that point, like I have as well, it's a process. Like, it really is. I remember having a moment where I just sat on the couch and just cried and cried and cried. I was like, I'm an additional needs parent. I've spent my whole life working with additional needs kids, and now I am an additional needs parent, right? And there's certain levels of complexities and layers and extra supports and things that we need to access, because that will lead me to my next point. You need your team.
Have a team, have a support network. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. One of the biggest clashes that we see with ADHD children is in education. If we don't get those relationships right and those environments right for our kids, we can inadvertently end up causing them more damage and, you know, more trauma, and damaging their self-esteem and identity as a learner. So really important. We've come a long way in education, but we've still got a long way to go. And that's where your advocacy skills, once again, are going to be so incredibly important, because I can't tell you, I just myself, I think because I knew so much about it and I'd worked in specialist settings for so long, I just assumed that other teachers knew about ADHD, but they actually don't.
Right.
It's so complex, and it's such a fascinating but complex condition. And, you know, one of the things I often say to families is that ADHD is a recognised medical condition, okay? We are advocating tirelessly to have ADHD put on the National Disability Insurance, yet we don't recognise it as a disability. I think a lot of people associate disability disorder as a deficit. Do you know what I mean? But a disability is something that impacts your life daily, that can stop you from living the best life that you want to be able to live, right? And so I think that that's really important. The advocacy piece for me is one of the hardest parts about being an ADHD parent, like in our intro, because so many people think they know what ADHD is, but they actually don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So get your team of allies around you. Okay.
Absolutely.
So when you need to go advocate, like at the school, you've actually, it's not just you or something like that. You actually have a support team.
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, we can't do it alone. We do need a team around us, and we need a community around us, and we need friends and family around us who love our kids and understand that, you know, more traditional parenting styles don't work for ADHD children. They know their own mind, and
Mm-hmm.
in this part of my work that I do with families and my courses and all that sort of stuff, we focus a lot on collaboration, teamwork, teaching kids to understand, which is why in the book, which I know we're going to get to, but I use some really key terms and phrases like dopamine, executive functioning, fluctuation, sensory challenges, because those are the tricky components of having ADHD that can throw us out of balance, right? And so if we can teach our kids to understand that from a fundamental neuroscientific level, that this is actually how your brain works, then we can learn to put those supports and scaffolds in place for ourselves. Obviously, our kids can't do that right now, which is why we have to do it for them. But ultimately, understanding our job is to move them towards independence to be able to do that for themselves as adults.
And it's giving parents every tool available to help them do that. And I think this is a beautiful segue to where your book comes in and the work that you do. I've had a sneak peek at the book, and I just love the way you've married up a combination, because it's a kid's book. It's obviously for kids, but it's for parents to read with their kids, and also for teachers. And I want to get to the teachers bit in a minute because you touched on that. But it's like a mixture of using those big words, dopamine and all that sort of stuff, with other simple pared back language for kids to understand. But it's also, it's like you're talking up to the family. You're not talking down to the family. And I love that parents can get a really great understanding of how their own minds work as well as their kids' minds. And the way you work together by reading the book together, the family comes together to understand everything at the same time. And I love how that book facilitates that situation. So you wrote the book obviously for your own kids, am I right?
Well, I didn't really. I wrote it. The course came first because once I started talking about my kids and having ADHD myself, and it became part of my work and connecting with my community and all that sort of stuff. People just kept saying, we need help, we need help, we need help. And when you're a service provider, it's very difficult to just do client work after client work after client work. And so I created a course which just went absolutely gangbusters. And the book was second to that, in that it was another way for me to share my knowledge and underpinning, my philosophy with a wider community, you know what I mean? And plus I know as an educator that storytelling, as you would know, as an author, is one of the most powerful ways to convey tricky concepts to kids. And it draws kids into that relational safety, that they're being held by us when we're telling them that they have ADHD, or we're sharing that we are an ADHD family, or whatever the concepts are. I know you cover lots of great concepts as well, but it's that attunement and safety and being held in that unconditional regard of like, well, this is us and this is who we are, and you're amazing and, wonderful, and you have ADHD and that's just how your brain works,
And I
And
love
so
that.
the book was sort of an add-on to me reaching further and wider, really.
And it's beautifully illustrated by Trish Burton. How did you find the illustrator? How did that relationship work?
So when I lived in Melbourne, because I've been in my business a decade now, had a really incredible small business community where we had this incredible ethos that we are all consumers and we all use services. And so why wouldn't we use other women in business in our local neighborhood, that we're using their services, so our money goes into their family. And it was sort of this really beautiful philosophy that we had going on in the inner western suburbs of Melbourne, which I sadly left to relocate to the new school. But so I met Trish through there.
Right. Because when you all read it, you'll just love these illustrations. I can tell you that right now. Now, importantly, the book can be used for educators, because you got a little message at the end of the book for teachers. How do you see this being a help for teachers?
Well, like I sort of mentioned before, Josh, the next most important relationship to a child outside of the family unit is an educator. And so we as families then almost hand that relationship over, and the messaging and that relationship becomes so important to our kids as well as school communities, right? And so what I had seen through my own lived experience when we just couldn't make it work in a particular educational setting was that the mismatch in values just really threw our whole family off balance. Do you get what I mean? And so when we find teachers and schools who understand our kids and our, you know, and I always say to teachers, like, you don't have to know everything about ADHD, but you have to also understand fundamentally that children are human beings who are loved and adored by their family. And you know, schools are almost like we're service providers, Josh. We're offering a service, which is education, which we know is absolutely so important. But we're also growing up kids' brains and teaching them how to love themselves as learners, as a part of a community. And if your child is constantly getting a message that they're not good enough or they're not welcome because they can't conform to the standards of whatever that might be, you don't reckon they're going to lose the plot?
I mean, that's one of the things I find is that your book, because I know teachers really do want more information. You know, I mean, they don't want to have to spend 50 PD days trying to learn everything, but a book like yours, which just simplifies it and just makes things a lot easier, can give the teacher just another perspective, another insight. So therefore they can then bring that into the classroom. And I think that's what your book's a great resource for that.
Yes. And I think the foundational message is we don't have to know everything about everything. It's almost like teachers are a bit like GPs, aren't they? They're expected to know a little bit about everything. And that's really hard. And I have so much empathy for teachers. But I can tell you right now, the one thing that moved the needle for my son was a school where the messaging was, we accept that this is hard for you, that you have hard days, but that you are always welcome back day after day after day. And we will not give up on you. And we will walk alongside you and be there to support you, even on the hard days. You know what I mean? And that's a real message
that's a powerful message.
Compassion over compliance, Josh, right? And this is understanding about ADHD as a disability. It is, some days our kids cannot put one foot in front of the other. Others, you wouldn't even know they are ADHD. You know what I mean? I joke a lot about the weather. It's like, because the weather fluctuates a lot, right?
Yes,
and that's why I have that analogy with ADHD is a bit like a beautiful rainbow appearing on a stormy day, because the colors of the rainbow are their strengths and their interests and their hyper focus and all the amazing energy that they bring to the world. But the storm clouds are the difficult parts when they really need our love and support. And unconditional regard is that we love you still, even though it's hard. And we won't ever give up trying to teach you about how to be the best person that you can.
I can just hear parents going, yes, yes, yes. I totally get that. So look, I'm going to wrap things up shortly, Chrissy. What's one last question? What lights you up?
Do you know what lights me up? It's fun. Well, I am a behaviorist, but I was actually thinking this the other day. We recently left the city to move for this incredible school that we found for our kids, and we're in the country now, which, you know, if I think about my own ADHD, my own dopamine seeking behaviors, I just love watching people. Like, I just find people fascinating. I love like being in the city or being on a train and just watching everyone, thinking about what are they doing? Where are they going? You know, whose family they are part of, or, you know, seeing other people with their friends on a train chatting. Or I was watching someone the other day who was obviously getting a message from somebody and they were smiling on the train, you know, and I just love learning and watching. I'm really observant with things like that. And I love seeing human interaction. And I think that for me too, if we think about the fact that our ADHD kids really struggle socially, they really do struggle. They really do want friends. They really do want to be a part of things. And having people in your life and relationships in your life are so important. You know, as I said to my son the other day, he loves gemstones. I was like, yeah, gemstones are awesome, mate, but they don't talk back to you, you know, and but you know what I mean? Like I said, in context of the conversation, it's, you know, it's one of those things is that we we are human beings, and human brains are stimulated through interactions and conversations and emotions connected with other human beings. And having people in your life is incredibly important. And so that's why I've always really worked hard with my kids around social skills and having really positive relationships with all different kinds of people.
Yeah, I totally agree. Chrissy, where can people get a copy of the book and find out more about you?
On my website, chaos2calmconsultancy.com.
I'll put it down here so everyone can go, and I'll put the links in the YouTube description as well.
That would be amazing.
Look, Chrissy, thank you so much for coming on my show. And look, good luck with everything. I love all the work you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me, Josh. It was a great chat.